As many of you know, I answer questions that people ask me. That's how this channel got started. And so, building on that, I have several videos where it seems as if I've come to the defense of the NIV. Interesting for a guy who was formerly a staunch King James Onlyist. And the NIV has long been the one that we beat up on when we have any sort of question or concern about another translation of the Bible in English. And so I want to address this question today because I was asked to do so. Does the NIV scrub Jesus' omnipresence in John 3:13? Well, according to Jack McElroy in his book, Which Bible Would Jesus Use?, the NIV scrubs Jesus' omnipresence. His supposed evidence is John 3:13. Let's look at this verse in the King James Version and also in the NIV. In the NIV, it says, "No one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven, the Son of Man." John 3:13 says in the King James Version, "And no man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven." McElroy goes on to say that the King James Version shows that Jesus lived in heaven and earth simultaneously. He goes on to accuse the NIV staff of dumping the rest of the verse because they chose manuscripts where the writers couldn't figure out how the Son of Man, who was then on earth, could also be in heaven. But is that so? As we address this issue, let's separate ad hominem from facts. Manuscripts don't have writers. They were copied by scribes. Some amateur, some professional. But McElroy is asserting to know the intent of those who worked on the NIV and the intent of those who penned the manuscripts used by the NIV translators. To be clear, the NIV translators work from the Nestle-Aland Greek critical text. Ultimately, the NIV translators didn't choose the manuscripts. They translated based off of the work of the Nestle-Aland team. But the question remains, did the Nestle-Aland team choose manuscripts where the writers couldn't figure out how the Son of Man, who was then on earth, could also be in heaven? This assertion is made by McElroy because the NIV does not add the text, which is in heaven, in John 3:13. If we look at other popular English translations, we'll see that the NIV is consistent with those modern translations. The LSB says, "And no one has ascended into heaven but he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man." The ESV says, "No one has ascended into heaven except he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man." The NASB, "No one has ascended into heaven except he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man." And the New King James, "No one has ascended to heaven but he who came down from heaven, that is, the Son of Man, who is in heaven." Well, as you can see, the New King James Version does include the phrase, "who is in heaven," because it uses the same underlying Greek text as the King James Version. The others use the Nestle-Aland text used by the NIV committees. Now, so why is there a difference? Well, here is John 3:13 in the TR and also in the Nestle-Aland text. The Greek text in question is ha on ento urano. As you can see, it is included in the TR, but it's missing in the Nestle-Aland. Why is it missing in the Nestle-Aland? Well, there's a clue in the text. If you look at the end of the verse in the Nestle-Aland, you'll see a symbol that looks like this. Two perpendicular lines. Now, I really don't know what that symbol is called. I know it as representing a Hebrew kamatz in the Hebrew Nikud vowel system. Whatever it's called, that symbol means that there's a textual variant at that portion of the text. It means that some manuscripts have a different reading here. The Nestle-Aland comes with a critical apparatus that shows us the reasoning behind the choices made in the Nestle-Aland text. It also contains a list of manuscripts and papyri fragments that have the chosen reading, and then it has other readings and the manuscripts that has those. Here's the critical apparatus for John 3:13. Now, I don't expect you to understand this or to read Greek. That is perfectly okay. I just want you to see it and be aware of it. And I'll explain it a little as we go along. In the critical apparatus, we find verse 13, and we see our little kamatz symbol that was present in the text. The text that follows, ha on ento urano, is the very text we see in the TR that the King James Version is based on. How cool is that? The text that is followed says, has a minus sign, and ha-on, followed by a and a star beside of it. That means that there is another variant for this same portion in a significant manuscript known as Alexandrinus. And the asterisk beside of that A tells us that the reading is not thought to be original, but part of a corrector or a change made by someone at a later time. The strange-looking text that comes next is a list of Greek letters representing Greek codices or manuscripts, and then a series of numbers representing other Greek manuscripts. Now, to keep things moving along, I won't go into the detail explaining the differences here. Next, there's a very important symbol, that M there. This means that the reading that is not included is in the majority of Greek manuscripts. It's also present in the Latin, Syriac, and Bohairic manuscripts. So it should be an easy decision, right? Ha, on, into, urano, or which is in heaven, should be included in the text. But why did the Nestle Island Greek text not include it? Because they deduced that it was not original. What did they base that on? Let's go back to the critical apparatus again. You'll see the symbol with the two parallel lines there, or the two lines with the break on it, followed by TXT. And then you'll see that's followed by more letters and numbers. The break with the TXT tells you the evidence that supports the reading chosen by the Nestle Island. Most importantly, at least to their decision on this variant, P66, P75, Aleph, and B do not have the reading. Who cares, right? We've already seen that it's present in the vast majority of manuscripts. Well, P66 and P75 are two of the oldest papyri that we have. P66 is usually dated to around AD 150 to 200, and P75 is likely between AD 175 and 225. These two very old manuscripts are consistent with two very old codices, Aleph and B. Aleph is Codex Sinaiticus, and it dates to around AD 330 to 360. B is Codex Vaticanus, and it dates to AD 325 to 330. While oldest does not always mean the best, and I hope you heard me on that, because many King James Onlyists will assert that I always assume that oldest means best. No, it doesn't. But there is a pattern here that led them to conclude that the phrase in question is not original, but it was added later, such as seen in the Alexandrinus corrector that I mentioned above. I know that's a lot to take in, but that is how textual criticism is done. That is the same kind of work that Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza did in producing their TR editions. It's the same kind of work that the King James Version translators had to employ when producing their translation. It's not always black and white as we expect or as we want it to be. And if you think this is complex, you should see how difficult it is to translate Hebrew because things are so heavily based on context. The point is, we should have some grace when it comes to translation. Now let's get back to the original question. Does the NIV scrub Jesus' omnipresence? Well, if that was their intention, they were absolute idiots. They failed miserably. Let's look at a few verses in the NIV. Matthew 18:20. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. Matthew 28b. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. John 14:20. On that day you will realize that I am in my Father and you are in me and I am in you. Ephesians 4:10. He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. As you can see, the NIV does not remove, hide, or otherwise obfuscate the omnipresence of Jesus as Yahweh. On the contrary, there are many places in the Gospels and in Paul's epistles that demonstrate quite the opposite in the NIV. Let's sum up. Jack McElroy is an extremely biased King James Version Onlyist, published by Chick Publications, which is an extremely biased King James Version Onlyist organization. McElroy's book is not scholarly. It is a collection of poorly presented arguments that are appealing to people who either choose not to do the homework or somehow are unable to do so. Now, I've refuted quite a few of these infographics in McElroy's book, Which Bible Would Jesus Use? And neither the NIV or modern English versions that do not include the reading, which is in heaven, do so in an attempt to scrub Jesus' omnipresence. They do it based on data-driven analysis of historical manuscript evidence. And I'll say it once again. If you love the King James Version, if it is your favorite translation, use it. Don't change. But there's no need to criticize those who use other faithful translations. This should not be a divisive issue. And irrational arguments like the ones found on every page of Jack McElroy's book are utterly pointless and are only convincing to those who either suffer from confirmation bias or are unwilling to see the extremely weak and flawed arguments presented by him.